Hello there, 3DMJers. This is Andrea Valdez, and I'd like to welcome you to Season 13 of the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. We are kicking this one off with Alberto, Brad, and I discussing the latest coaching techniques that are being used within the 3DMJ practice as of 2019. It's been quite a while since we've discussed our coaching business as a whole, and even longer since we revisited some of the things that we have been learning and implementing as a group. So in this episode, you'll start by hearing Alberto and Brad discuss our latest athlete track that we've started within our company, which is the introduction of our bi-weekly coaching program that we've been using with some of our off-season and Gen Pop clients. Brad and Bert tell you how they like to use this new schedule, what benefits it has provided for our future competitors, and what it has taught them as coaches. Because as a business so far who specialized in competition training for quite a few years, opening the doors up to ongoing off-season coaching has been a whole new adventure, and we'd like to tell you all about that. And speaking of competition coaching, later in this episode, the guys talk about what has changed in their contest prep practices over the last year or so, followed by what they've done differently with their powerlifting athletes as well. And for each of those sports, we go into both the nutrition and training strategies used. So in short, the whole episode is about things we did not do, say in 2017 and 2018, and what we are doing now within our ever-evolving practice as we learn and test new ideas over time. Before we get into that, though, I just want to let you guys know that we're trying a little bit of a different podcasting schedule for this season. So rather than releasing 10 weekly episodes with a 4 to 6 week break before the next season starts, we're simply going to be releasing this show every other week on an ongoing basis for the next few months. Just like with our coaching, we're going to test this out, maintain some consistency, see how it goes in the longer term before deciding if it's a good fit to continue with. So we're currently in March 2019 as I'm talking to you, and we'll definitely do this through July before giving you guys an update and how we'll proceed with all that. So that is it. Let's go ahead and get into it. Here are our latest coaching techniques with Brad Loomis and Alberto Nunez. Okay, so Brad, recently, not recently, in the last few months, we have started an off-season / Gen Pop leg to our coaching program. Can you talk to the peeps about how that's different than our usual competition weekly coaching thing?
Yeah, and you just hit it, because competition prep is weekly, right? So they're required. I don't know. I guess I don't want to say required, but basically we expect them to check in weekly, right? And when they check in, there's certain criteria that we have them check in on, and physique photos or video, etc. They need weekly coaching, right? Sometimes we make adjustments weekly depending on if we're on a time crunch or not. Whereas with our new program with Gen Pop, it's bi-monthly, so it's every other week, right? And I think that's the biggest difference, is that you're looking at 2 times a month, and it's nice for accountability. So, you know, if you kind of fall off the wagon, you're only going to do that for so long, because in another, 7, 8 days, you're going to have to check in with coach again and start coming up with your excuses. So yeah, that's the biggest difference.
Yeah.
And then outside of that, I think on the coach's end, it's nice. It's really nice, because we're picking up people that have competition aspirations,
Right.
And they're like a new, blob of clay that we get to mold, and we get to teach them, kind of the, I don't know what you want to call it, the evidence-based practices that we, kind of make our standards, without the stress of a looming date, that is coming upon us. So yeah, there's kind of the two difference, I guess, on the athlete's end and then on the coach's end as well.
Yeah, and then you said that we have strict criteria or whatever. Like we have a lot of things that a prep athlete reports, because they need specific macros almost all the time. They need to follow their protocols. They don't get to skip cardio sessions every Sunday. Things like that. And from what I understand, you guys don't have. I mean, not just from what I understand, we don't have to do all that with the off-season / Gen Pop peeps, right?
Yeah, we don't have to be as meticulous at all. Yeah, in fact, I would say that the majority of my folks don't even track macros. They just basically just track some calories. And even then, I usually have them do that every day. I'll just have them do that about 4 or 5 days a week. And, just so we get trends, we can kind of compare weekly averages and kind of figure out what's going on. And might have to be a little bit more meticulous if we're going into a dieting phase, or we're doing some diet programming for a specific rate of loss. Some folks, but we got to track just so we make sure they eat enough.
Yeah.
Our resident metabolic squirrel over there can probably attest to that.
Yeah. I was going to say, Bert, we've talked about this a lot, how I think this has opened up a pretty cool area for us, because I know you've talked to us a lot, Bert, that the off season is where most bodybuilders haven't quite learned that. Like, people master a prep before they master an off season, right?
Yeah. Most people who you see on stage, like, routinely, like, they got that part down, especially if you've seen them on that stage more than once. Mm-hmm. But the other part, they almost don't even like it,
Yeah.
Yeah, very common.
So it allows us to keep an eye on them, because we say, we refer to it a lot as it's Gen Pop / off season, because like you said, there's the blobs of clay and that have these future aspirations, but we also have, and what I think we're doing a service to, of a very underserved population, which is the competitor who hasn't figured out how to off season.
Yeah. And again, sometimes we assume if you're on stage, well, you got the other part, because we expect off season to be the easier, but that's not always the case. I feel. Most people learn it the other way around. They master a prep probably before they're really okay with everything that is off season, I feel. Or maybe it's 50-50, but nevertheless, it's not the way most people assume it to be.
Yeah, if you haven't competed before, you don't realize it. But I think a lot of people who have competed understand.
Yeah.
Anyone who's done their first off season after their first prep, I think, can attest to the fact that that's a weird place to be.
Yeah, very much.
And so we'll start with you, Bert, since we're Brad last. What has this new service kind of taught you, right? Because I know when I first started coaching prep athletes with y'all, I was like, oh, there's a lot of things because I only have my experience and a few others, but coaching, I learned a lot of, this is what a lot of athletes go through, and I didn't expect it. Is there anything like that with you that's come up with these new bi-weekly crop of athletes?
This was directed at myself.
It's at you, right, Bert. You, Bert. Okay. What's been different? What are some things that you do different with your bi-weeklies versus your preppers?
Well, I think just from my perspective, I appreciate it more, way more, because I've noticed that on my end, I have quite a few people who are pretty good at the whole prep thing. They've done a few preps, they've done quite well, and they still feel like it's worth it to have a coach in the off season that it's going to help them stay objective, especially objective in a period of time that it so stretched out and so long that before you know it, because you make all these mini bad micro decisions, 3 months have gone by and you had no intentions of ending up here, and here you are, now you're in this hole. So a lot of my athletes, I think they've tried it that way. They tried doing it on their own, and in just a few short months working together, they're like, this is so much better. It's so much more relaxing. I can, even though nothing is really imminent and there's nothing usually urgent that they have to report with every check-in, still, it makes the off-season experience so much better, because they hand over the decision-making stuff to me. I kind of have this long-term trajectory, which of course I share with him. It's okay, this is where I see us in 10 months or what have you. So I've learned to appreciate that way more, because in the past it's no, you understand a few basic principles, just be patient, don't diet for over a year if possible, go off season and come back when you're ready, and this is where I'd like you to be. And
it doesn't always work that way.
Yeah, they don't end up where they don't start the prep where I want them to be, and the off season was such a stress instead of it being this fun, productive time that they're almost like, oh, I'm so glad that we started this prep because it saved my life yet again.
Yeah.
So I've just learned to appreciate it so much more and appreciate the need for off-season coaching, and which makes sense because again, that's where so much of the good stuff happens is your off-season, and the longer you do this, the more you're going to depend on having a good off-season, I feel.
Yeah. So it makes your job easier.
Yeah. So I'm sold on it. I'm like, yeah, this is a great thing, and I encourage my athletes to, it used to be when they're done with their prep, it's like, okay, we're in a decent spot now to start gaining. Go do your thing. You know your basics. You know your fundamentals. You know what we're supposed to be doing in terms of zigzagging in this off season with gaining and cutting and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But if someone were to ask me, like maybe a year and a half ago, it's like, can I stay on the roster? I'm like, there's something wrong here, and now it's like, oh, okay, it's a cool luxury if you can afford it, and so I'm sold on it, and it's going to make a lot of my athletes, like when they actually do start their prep, it's going to be exactly how I want because I'm super picky about that. So I'm sold on it. If you can, it's not a bad idea, and I like our system that it's every 2 weeks because it keeps the person from like microanalyzing what happened week to week.
Yeah. Yeah, and because before the alternative to weekly coaching, we've always had like this off-season Skypes.
Yeah.
And that would be, what would y'all say on average, like 8 to 12 weeks before you talk to someone again? And like you said, that's a pretty good chunk of time. That's a pretty good chunk of time to fall off compared to 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
No, absolutely.
4 to 6 times as long away. Okay. Glad to hear it's working for real. So Brad, what would you say has changed in the way, because I know, again, if we're taking it a year ago, you either had an athlete that was about to compete, usually, or an athlete that just competed and we're going through this recovery phase. But now that there's this big amount of time in between that you do have someone on your roster, your biweekly roster, are there techniques that you feel like you've had to learn? Like, let's start nutritionally. Like, are there things that, like, nutritional tools that you have in your toolbox that you're actually making better use of now? And what would they be now that you have this new in-betweener?
Yeah. I've learned, I've developed, I guess, got to coach a person to be a more normal person. A person that doesn't track everything meticulously, because that's kind of my goal for almost everybody, is that we don't track.
In the off-season.
We still make it. Exactly. Yeah. That's almost always my goal, is that, let's get to a point to where we don't track calories. We still make progress. We still are progressing in the gym, but we don't track calories. We just go by hunger and satiation and get body weight a couple times every other week or something like that, right? That's kind of always my goal for everybody. And so when you don't really coach that, it's hard to develop that skill, because we never really see people when they're like that. Even with our Skype consultations, I would need some sort of data in order to get an idea of how they tick. And so I would need them to collect data. And then I would basically tell them, okay, this is how you tick, do this for the next 6 to 8 weeks. And then hopefully after you know how to tick a little bit and you go through 8 weeks of living this way, you won't have to track anymore. So a lot of my techniques have kind of harnessed that skill so that I can get them there sooner, and get them to I guess, buy into the belief that, it's not going to, I think Berto said this one time, you don't have to sacrifice a lamb in order for the sun to rise. It's going to rise anyway, and so you kind of find out, oh, well, you know what? My weight is staying the same, or my weight is going up a tiny, tiny bit, or whatever, once you're able to coach that skill into them.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because, I think that goes to the coaching side of it. Like, every new coach is like, how do I get people to lose weight? How do I get people to make their own meal plans? And how do I get people to do all the newly restrictive things and then get frustrated when they don't do it or whatever. And it's, until this conversation, I guess I never really thought about the stuff that you guys had to learn. Not that y'all, I mean, y'all understand the basic principles, but I guess the things that you haven't really had to coach before, maybe it's in a long time. What about you?
No, it's been different. It has been different. Like our goals are very different. Like I think the muscle building, for the most part, if you have a few things lined up, you don't even have to be perfect, to be honest. Like I find myself haggling more with a lot of these athletes in regards to like what we can do, and I'm like, okay, well, that brings us down a few notches from where I want to be when it comes to this specific thing. But you have more fun and there's more enthusiasm behind your motions, so we'll do that. So you lift progressively, and you spend enough time eating enough. It's almost like your body eventually is like, all right, I think we'll do this non-frugal, more expensive way of adapting to our strength training. So not just strength, but like muscle building. Like just need to hang out there long enough, and eventually it racks up. So it gives you, since it takes so long and it's so straightforward, you get to work on all these other things that are super important if you want to do this for a long time. And I feel a super important one is just, this takes a long time, right? The off season takes a long time. A good off season does. So that means you're going to have to live in this body that you're not necessarily 100% comfortable with. You're gonna it's something that's gonna have to be an acquired taste. Mm-hmm. So making sure that people spend enough time there, and not when they get to that point where they're like, God, this is my threshold, let's cut down. It's because usually for most people, when they get to that threshold, that's when like stuff really starts to happen. Like, when you started to, find an off-season outlet with a lot of these other forms of weight training, it was kind of in that weight range where in the past you'd been like, no way, I can't hang around here. Like it's no good.
It only took about 6 months after 3 years of fighting not being that weight. But
yeah, but you have to not just arrive there, but you have to chill there.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the most like constant thing I find myself doing. And it's like the equivalent for me, like 190s. Like 190s for me is kind of that threshold where it's like, ooh, you look okay in your clothes, but keep the shirt on, dude. But I know that this is where the magic happens, and for most people, it's the exact same way. They're going to get to a certain spot where it's like, you're self-sabotaging if you leave this super chill environment. Because we talk about often the whole like recomping thing is thrown out there, and I think people swear it happens way more frequently than it does. Like you have that lean guy that it's 10%, he wants to add 5 pounds of muscle, but maybe there's a hack so we can lose 2% and then also put on muscle. And it's like, no, dude, most people don't fit the criteria to make that happen. But where it does kind of happen is when you let people get to that point where they have enough fat in their body, where anyone who's done this long enough will tell you, it's like, it's almost like, it does happen there. The recomp happens, but it happens at a body fat that you don't necessarily like. And it makes sense because we have this extra fat there. So if your body ever wants to make some muscle, it's like, I guess we can pull from these stores. But no one wants a body recomp when they're, 17% of their men and, 23% of their females. They want it to happen 10% lower usually.
Yeah.
Teaching them the goodness of hanging out in that zone is, and usually it's not like I tell them something that clicks. It's just like, no, we're not cutting. No, we're not cutting.
Yeah.
No, we're not cutting. And then 6 months later, they're like, I'm so glad we didn't cut because I look so much better now. So that's I think the big one, I feel.
Yeah. Would you agree with that, Brad?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we've seen that even just, anecdotally with ourselves.
Yeah.
It's kind of like with me, when I get into those 190s, that's where it seems to be the most productive training. And if I ever bodybuild again and get all yucky, that's when I'll probably see all that, all the fruits of that labor.
Yeah. I mean, shit, Eric is going through that right now.
Yeah, for sure. He's all kinds of confused. He's like, why the hell do my legs look like this? Well, it's because you were, living at about 220, 230 pounds for a good long while.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess because people, I think, would ask, right? We've talked about the differences, like behaviorally, nutritionally. But they'd be like, well, what do you do different training in? I would assume Actually, I'm not going to assume. Do you do anything different training wise between peeps in the prep mode and peeps who are in there for the biweekly check-ins for the long haul for the off season?
I'll let Brad go first with this one.
Oh shoot! I was going to say I want to hear what Bert has to say. I will say that I'm a lot more lenient. I'm lenient, but still, I'm lenient where it's kind of acceptable to be lenient, right?
Okay.
So I think Bert's talked about this before, where you kind of have your garbage blocks of training, and I'll let those kind of garbage blocks of training happen, especially if it means compliance. So like the people want to, the gym pop people, they want to get away from their structure, and this semi-rigid structure that I've set up for them, and they've done a good job. They've executed, several blocks in the manner in which that I want them to execute it. And so they just want to do something different. And I'll be like, oh, you know what? Okay, that's fine. We're in a good spot. We've made good progress here, both in the gym and weight wise and whatnot. And then, I'll just, I'll give them some structure, but I'll say, okay, let's just give you the little spreadsheet. You just make your dream split, make it whatever it is that you want to make it. And let's go ahead and do that for about 4 or 6 weeks, and then we'll deload and we go back to, something a little bit more productive. And then a little bit more smaller time frame than that. I've learned the importance of keeping the high skill lifts in place, but then letting the stuff that is not so dependent upon skill be a little bit more varied, from session to session and from block to block. A curl's a curl. As long as we're hitting those biceps, is there really that much skill involved in doing a hammer curl versus a cable curl, spider curl or whatever? And so with those folks, I'll let them be a little bit more lenient. And that's going to cross over even to my competition prep folks, to where it's like, okay, you have just learned how to do a front squat. I'm sorry. We're sticking with a front squat for a good long while. That's a skill that you've developed that we need to actually make progress on.
Yeah.
But does it really matter if it's a side lateral raise with a kettlebell or a cable or a dumbbell or the machine that's got the little elbow pads on it? No, I'll be a little bit more lenient there, and you can kind of trade those out as you feel that, you need to for the freshness.
Yeah. Anything to add there, Bert? We'll let you go second. Did you force Brad?
I could be a bit more assertive with the training blocks, more risque in some ways, because especially at that body weight that everyone wants to cut down from. I think the payout is totally worth it, because if you're doing all these things consistently with your body that you've never done before, it's like, oh, okay, that little wrinkle that I get in my abs when I sit down doesn't bother me as much, because my body does these other cool things now.
When you say more aggressive and more risque, can you?
Yeah, I push for more progress. So maybe if they're running a percentage program, I'll run a sequence that it's like, maybe this person's not reppy, and it's like, we have a 5x3 with 92.5% at the end of this block, Yeah. So stuff like that, where if we get that, it's almost like magic. I want to look away when they're doing the sets. Did you get it? Stuff like that, I think it's fun to write things like that and have something be so predictable on the other end. Because I say risque, but it happens. It happens really frequently. So your body can just take a whole lot more. And if you stay healthy, it's so cool how predictable things are. It's like, you input this and that's the output, and it just keeps happening. So yeah. I like that bit. And then another thing is that, you have this extra energy, your body's more resilient. So I'll let the person, kind of like Brad, I'll negotiate. It's like, hey, so if you're going to take that spin class that you like, go take that spin class, If, maybe in the training week, I'll have a few slots where they can put in whatever it is that they like to do, and fill it up with whatever you want, just don't make it don't do Romanian deadlifts or something there. So yeah, I like that aspect of programming, because when you're programming for someone who's like very close to the stage, it's the outlook is very different. The perspective is so different. It's like, you know what, I don't want to break you,
Yeah.
and assume that you're tired by the time you're done with like your first working set of the day.
Yeah.
Whereas on this end, it's what training is about. So that's probably the fun part, is that when I had mostly preppers, I was usually, and here's the thing, that's the difference. That's where it does benefit compared to the Skype, because with the Skype, it's like I send someone with their programming, bring this back in 3 or 4 months. I do have to be a bit more conservative with that.
Because you don't know if they're feeling good 3 months in or 2 months in. Yeah.
Checking in every 2 weeks, it's more like, and I love that part. That's probably my favorite part of coaching, is just, it's like writing up the training stuff. It's not even the nutrition stuff. It's like writing that out and making that happen. So yeah, that's probably this year I've been writing more programs that are a bit more assertive, and people end up doing things like 6 months later they would have just absolutely like crushed them, could not have happened at the start. So that's that. I wouldn't say that's different, but it's a different perspective for me.
Well, you just have the opportunity to work on that more, where you didn't when it was either prep or I'll see you in 3 months.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like if they would have been off on their own, like who knows what they would have been doing? Like if they would have been like cutting like every 3 months, maybe not like focusing on being as progressive as we could with the programming, they're not going to have a great off season. But since I babysit them, it's more like we just, and in turn what that does is they end up loving their off season. And now they're like, I'm about this. I think I'm okay with another year before I compete again. So, yeah.
And that's not to say too that, like I know that you guys, you two and Jeff, actually and Eric, all have certain athletes that you've had for multiple competition seasons that, hey, do this, I'll see you in 6 months. Actually, it was kind of fine, right?
Yeah.
It's
my buddy Craig Toth, one of those guys. He's a trooper. It's like he's gonna get it done, and he'll do he could be left unsupervised, and he's golden.
Yeah. What's cool so far in this conversation is that we started with nutrition, and y'all both were like, well, we don't really have to track. We don't really have to be on their asses about this stuff. We don't have to, we weigh in every once in a while. Like, to the listener, it might have sounded like, oh, well, that sounds real easy. Like, do I need a coach? And then when we talked about the training, we're all like, we get to do all this extra shit,
Mm-hmm.
So it's, I guess it was just a good illustration of it's like a trade-off. It's not less work. It's not less hard. It's just the efforts. Like you said, like in prep, don't break. Nutrition is meticulous. In the off season, it's like, okay, we'll loosen up that food a little bit, but this is go time with the training. And
yeah. With prep, it's like, I guess the way I like to picture it, it's like you're defensive the whole time. You just have your hands up and you're like, don't hit me in the face. Whereas like off season, like you feel like Mike Tyson, like your bell rings and you're running to the center circle and
you're gonna bite someone's ear off. Or...
If it takes, that's what it takes to give us some lats, we'll do it. But as long as it's not on the banned substance list. But yeah, it's a lot of people haven't tasted that. They might have had like 3 contest preps, but they never have felt what it feels like to be an athlete and like do these things with your body that at no point did you think was like possible. Like, shoot, I'm gonna Good Morning 4 plates this off season.
Hey,
like, that's like I couldn't have imagined that one, And part of it is being 190 and just hanging out there,
Yeah. I think that's a good direction changer too. Let's chat about prep for a while. So that was like this big conversation of, we have this new thing that we started in the past few months, the whole off-season Gen Pop. This is how it's been cool for us. But I want to talk about within y'all's coaching practice of being prep coaches, what's so, like, say, different now than, I don't know, this time 2018, so about a year ago? What are some things y'all are having fun with? What are things that you've learned and observed with your athletes? And let's start with nutrition again. Like, is there anything, let's go with Brad, anything different or new that you've learned in this last year, things that you're really liking nutritionally that you wouldn't have been doing a year ago?
I think again, getting back to less tracking. I mean, we all have to get to that point, right? We all have to get to that point to where it's like we have to be overly OCD about hitting those macros at the end of the day and hitting those calories, right?
At some point every prep, yeah.
Exactly. But with some folks, especially because we always harp on enough time, give yourself enough time, give yourself enough time, give yourself enough time, right? I've even got and this athlete's very, very savvy, but I haven't given her any targets. I haven't given any targets at all, no calories. I just said, okay, I want you to lose a half a pound to a pound a week. And you know how to do that. You just go at it. And I want to say that we did that for like 4 weeks, maybe. And we're just now getting to where we actually have to start assigning macros, assigning calories, and actually start tracking things a little bit.
Nice.
But I mean, that's such a luxury. And again, this athlete's very savvy, competed several times. But when we get athletes from our off-season program, they're kind of like that. You know what I mean? They've done what we need them to do, and they've experienced what needs to happen and how they need to go about their business, that we can kind of do that with some of our blobs of clay that we've kind of started to mold. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I would have never done that probably last year. I would have never said, okay, I just want you to eat. I just want you to track and lose a third of a pound a week, and I think that's the biggest thing nutritionally. And it's such a, I don't know, it takes a lot of pressure off of a coach when you don't have to go right out the gate, analyze, ask questions back and forth, almost get into debates on Skype, trying to figure a person out. You can just let them do their thing, and then you've got basically mountains of data to program from at that point.
Why do you feel comfortable doing that now and not a year ago? Is it a learning thing? Is it a practice thing? Is it?
Good question. I almost want to say that it's not universal. I think that I can do that with some of these athletes that we've converted from our off-season program. I can do that with a very seasoned veteran. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's universal. I don't think I would do that with everybody.
Right.
If we have 24 weeks available to us and 28 pounds to lose,
yeah,
I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's universal. I don't think that I would feel comfortable with that on everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But in 2018, I wouldn't have felt comfortable with that at all.
Right. And we talked about that in Eric's, he had a prep update episode, how he has done his first, Bert, 2/3 of his prep without tracking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's still kind of his, I think his refeeds, we have those tracked now, but he's kind of
getting to that point.
What feels right on his low days, yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Bert? Something that you're incorporating now that's going real well for you nutritionally that you wouldn't have been doing a couple years ago or a year ago?
I think to start is anytime there's a new division that comes into the physique sports, like we're kind of like, that's different. Like, what do you mean a novice class? Like, just go for varsity. What are you talking about? Because it used to be that way. It was like, you're doing bodybuilding. You pick whether you want a top or not, and that's it. That's all the choices you had. And now we have like all these like different classes. And the latest one was the bikini class. And I've been having a blast with like my bikini athletes because I've had a few long enough now where I just think about, because that's the issue with that class, is that it's not intimidating. Like if you think you want to give this a go, it's like, hey, I can see myself doing that in a few months if I work hard. And what ends up happening is a lot of the not so good coaches end up picking up these girls. And that's where we hear the majority of our horror stories now. So I've been having a great time with my bikini athletes because once they try it the way we do things, which is basically they can train for the most part the way, all our other athletes do. Obviously, each class has certain body parts that, we want to specialize them a bit more, but it's pretty much the same. You're going to have a fundamentally sound training program that's going to look very similar to like Bodybuilder Joe over there. But so they see that and they see what their friends are doing and they're like, this is so different. And then like a year goes by and they're like, wow, I'm doing so much better than that friend, not just when it comes to like physique development, but also like when it comes to like where my mind is in the game. So I've been enjoying that immensely. And a lot of the bikini chicks look like figure girls from like 5 years ago now.
Yeah.
That's kind of what always ends up happening, right?
Every new division gets harder over time, yeah.
They all have to progress, right? And it usually means more muscular, more symmetrical, more, all that. So that's been a blast. I'd say the other thing would be a little bit more assertive with men when it comes to picking on calories more than cardio. It's just way more predictable, especially at the end. Like we hardly ever have this negotiation where it's like, okay, so what fits best? It's like especially if I feel like they're ready and they can handle it. Like I'm not opposed to having a male to get into that kind of shape, like roam around like 9 to 10 calories per pound. Which when most people do the math, they're like, oh my god! But it's like we're competing now, okay? Like it's different, and the majority of people are going to have to be around 10 calories per pound to get there. Like that's kind of sort of where Jeff is right now. And you have to like put out a disclaimer before he mentioned his numbers on his low days because people freak out about how it's going to hurt and such. But just don't do it if it pains you. But yeah, that's something that I do a little bit more with my dudes. It's like I'm a little bit more aggressive than I was in past years when it comes to their calories. Because it's just way more predictable. We don't spend like these 4 to 6 weeks where I'm like, I feel like we just kind of wasted time and, went back and forth when we could have just cut the calories and gotten the results we wanted.
Why do you say with men?
Because with women, if you cut calories too low, you start having these hormonal issues that can impact fat loss. So, with women typically, like I'll make sure that their refeeds, if anything, like when we scale them pound per pound to where they started, are probably a little bit higher towards the end of the prep. Even if it means that to make up for it, we might have to stretch out a few more low days where it's like 7 straight low days, but then we have these like 3 really good refeeds that are now 16.5 calories per pound as opposed to the 15.5 that we started with. So with women, I've definitely seen, just keeping them in shape hormonally, keeping them healthy on that end just makes everything look so much better. Everything from like their training to how predictably they lose, the way they look, the way they mentally feel. Because that is a catch-22 is a female. Like you have these hormonal fluctuations that there's certain parts of the month where it's pretty rough up here, right? But I'd say that it's probably more rough to be totaled hormonally and not have your regular cycle intact. Like that is way worse. Like, I think most physique competitors that have been on both sides will tell you that, I'd rather have like bad PMS than like have to deal with like 3 months of like
no period at all.
Yeah.
Or your hair breaking off or whatever.
Yeah. It's just not a good time.
If you think about it, I mean, females are just smaller humans. Imagine a 100-pound female doing 9 calories a pound.
Yeah.
That's not real livable.
Yeah.
I'd get thrown
Steve would be so mad at you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I agree with Bert. I think with those small humans, you gotta get them to move a little bit, so that they can keep their food a little bit higher. Because that's always my goal. I mean, if I can get you keep your cycle on, through the whole prep, that's always a big goal. Sure, it's going to be pretty stressful the day of the show if you're having your menstrual cycle, but that's a good trade-off in my opinion.
Yeah. Generally comes with a little bit better training, a little more sanity, all that good stuff.
But yeah, dudes way more assertive. Like, and especially like bigger dudes. Like sometimes, a big part of what makes for a huge difference with like caloric needs with men and women is just the size of the athlete. But one thing you'll see with men is that there tends to be this weird spot with men in terms of body weights, like between like say 140 contest weight to like 170 contest weight, where they're just like burners pound for pound, like way more than that like really huge mesomorphic guy that it's like 190 on stage. Like that guy, like almost right away, I'm like, yeah, he's going to be in like 9 calories per pound for like 2 months to get there. Whereas like, the smaller men they tend to pound for pound just need more. So those big dudes, I always know like, yeah, we're going to see some numbers that like some intermediate kid on Instagram is going to see and he's going to be like, oh my God, your life is horrible. Yeah.
Those are the true cavemen that have really survived starving way back in the day.
They're just meant to be big people. Yeah.
Exactly. They'd be starving and they would eat you and then go hunting.
Yeah.
Just hopping in for a quick reminder that we have recently released the 3DMJ Lifting Library 2.0. The Lifting Library is our all-in-one video course solution to perfecting the essential movements and exercises that every bodybuilder needs to know and execute well. Once you buy this thing, you have lifetime access to the course, which will increase in size, quality, and price year after year as it grows over time. As of now, we've just increased it from 12 chapters to 18 chapters, and it covers the big 3 movements: split squats, good mornings, pull-ups, dips, lateral raises, calf raises, RDLs, hanging leg raises, overhead presses, and a whole lot more. The library includes extremely high-quality video tutorials for every movement, key performance strategies for executing the lifts correctly, and most importantly, detailed programming considerations that will tell you exactly how and why you should include or not include certain exercises into your training program. So go to liftinglibrary.com, sign yourself up now for lifetime access, and every few months you'll be notified of when you have new content in your course so you can log back in and build upon your training education for years to come. Again, that's liftinglibrary.com. Go there and sign yourself up for the free trial today. What about in terms of training? Because our conversations as a coaching practice have been pretty different here of late. The last couple of times we've had Eric do our research and development updates. So I can think of a couple things, but I'll let y'all start me off with things that you are prescribing with your athletes or working with your athletes or allowing your athletes to do that wouldn't have happened a year or two ago. Bert or Brad? Who wants to go first? Okay, Bert.
Oh, I was pointing at Brad, but obviously he's not actually in the room.
He said no. He said no.
He said I start. Okay.
It's time, yeah.
He said he wanted you to start. I heard him.
Yeah. So one thing that a few years ago was like the thing was the daily undulating periodization, and a lot of folks they thought the DUP is like, yeah, you squat 4 times a week is what it is. That's what it is. But it's just training a different attribute, like over the course or different attributes that are part of what you're aiming for, like over the course of a week. So again, like a golfer, like this is his long day game, and then this is his putting day, and this is like his sand. It's like all sports kind of do that, and a lot of bodybuilders had been doing it that way for like ever. It's just they didn't know it fell in that category. But yeah, once like we started to see a lot more success with the DUPs, like it was like, especially powerlifting. I think drug-free powerlifting, that's where we've seen the biggest difference. Like that's why athletes are so much stronger now. It's everyone used to run like the West Side type of training format, and that's so antiquated now. And we have girls squatting 600 pounds. We're 21 years old now. But yeah, and a big part of it is the fact of is how we structure our training throughout the week. And one thing that I think bodybuilders have been doing for a long time, and like now, and we mentioned this in the last meeting with Eric, they call them feeder workouts, where they're kind of pumpy, they're, like lower stress. The goal is to almost like feel better at the end of the training session than how you walked in. That's a huge thing with a lot more of my athletes. Like I'll find primarily machine work for them, work that is, so for example, like where we don't stretch out the muscle a whole lot, so we don't cause any more muscle damage. But again, it primes us for harder sessions that are coming later in the week. And so that's been a huge one. That's one thing that Eric mentioned in our last meeting was, for strength athletes, the what was it? It was I guess you could call it a speed day, a power day. Or,
the
power day.
Yeah, skill day.
Yeah, a
And
skill
so
day.
with bodybuilders, go ahead.
Yeah, like instead of like maybe our main like pec movement is a bench press. Maybe like in that bridge workout in the middle, we'll do something like a pec deck fly.
Yeah.
We keep the RPEs at like 5-6 reps pretty high, and again, the goal is just to feel better and facilitate recovery going into our next big session, which we'll say it's Friday. And the big one that caused all this chaos was the Monday session, and Wednesday ends up being like that bridge workout. It's something, that I use a lot more with my athletes now, and they have a lot of fun with it too, because it kind of takes them back to their like, we all kind of start as like pumpers. Yeah. So
okay, so what you're saying is like a few years ago, the DUP, we say the DUP, like it's not a program, it's just a way of structuring your training was more like, say you have the big three, you have a strength day, a power day, and a hypertrophy day, right? And so you're saying like a lot of times we would think like same movement, different rep ranges as intensities. And now what you're saying is there might be, say in a 4-day split, it might go like compounds, and I'm really simplifying this, but like a compound day of heavy shit, and then like a fluffy day of pump work, and then a compound day of heavy shit. So that's what you're saying, right? When you see the bridge workout, it's those in-betweens that are just to make you feel better, to decrease stress overall, but to get the volume in that you need on these little isolation things.
Yeah. It's like the old, I guess the original DUP for bodybuilding was like lean Orton's fat, and it had like a power day, right? And then it had a volume day, and like that was it. And you just went from one to the other, right? So yeah, one thing like I think that like when the DUP started to become a big thing was like that bridge day. We started to see the importance in that. So not just powerlifters. Powerlifters, obviously, they do it a bit different. It's like a skill day more than anything. But with bodybuilders, it's like the feeder workouts are something that a lot of guys who've been doing this for a while, like it's been around forever. It's just I don't think it's ever been thought of as a bridge day.
Well,
it used to be something you do when you feel bad. Like you go to the gym and you're like, it's not happening. We're just gonna have a pumpy feeder day. Yeah. So.
Or like oh shit, what was I gonna say? I don't know what I was gonna say. I had it, and you had one more sentence, and I lost it. Damn.
Well, all sports kind of have that. There's that they tend to like in between these big sessions. There's like, hey, we'll use the golfer, which I know nothing of, so I could be totally wrong. But you have your day where you're driving really far, right? And then before you come in and you work on mostly your putting work, maybe you have a light day in between to get yourself ready for that session. So that's something that I don't think we ever did. It was just, it's a lot of going hard in bodybuilding. And I think having those cruiser workouts, like we've learned to see the benefit in that.
Yeah, I know what I was going to say now. Was a problem that I used to have a lot would be when you have a heavy compound at the start of every training day, like your isolations get whatever's left of you. And sometimes your physique really needs that shit.
Yep.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. I knew it mattered a little bit. Glad I said that.
Yeah, no, that's a yeah. On those days, it's like when we're doing the pec fly, it's like, hey, we get to get some really good arm work because our triceps aren't fried from the pressing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I'm glad you brought up powerlifters too, because I do once we finish all our talks here about some fun things we've been doing with bodybuilders as of late. I want to get into powerlifting too with y'all. But more things with the bodybuilders if you have them. Not even if you have them. I'm going to bring it up because everyone's going to be like, why don't you talk about it? Because everyone wants to know about your dog crap Myo-rep stuff.
That's right.
Yeah. That, in fact, that's funny that you mentioned that because I was just going to talk about that.
Go ahead, Brad. Start us off.
A year ago, I would have never programmed that, ever. Just because, I was thinking to myself, go ahead, what are you going to say?
No, like, can you explain what I'm talking about? Like, when you say I would have never programmed that, what is that?
Yeah. Oh, that. You mean the Myo-reps?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I would have never programmed any of those type of drop set, pause, sets, because it in my mind, it screwed with my program. It limited your volume through the lack of rest. You could have gotten this much volume had you rested appropriately, in between sets. And so, even a year ago, I'd have been like, no, you know what? You're limiting yourself there. But especially now when, Eric's kind of talking more about, the number of sets versus the number of repetitions, and we're talking about time management, and things like that. It's not like I'm programming it globally, to everybody. And likewise, maybe 3 things on a person's program, might be Myo-reps. But I am finding it, pretty useful. Mm-hmm. It's reassuring to know that, okay, you know what, volume is going to drop. It's okay, because those repetitions that you're doing are the really hard repetitions. And so, you can let that volume come down by a third. Whereas a year ago, that would have scared me. If I would have saw your numbers dropping, I'd have been like, oh, we got to do something here. We got to run a hyper block. We got to run a couple of weeks where we're just adding sets, you know what I mean, to kind of make up for that. But yeah, that's one thing that I've started using just here recently, in both my competition prep athletes and my off-season athletes.
Yeah. And that's just kind of how we've adopted the look of, like you said, instead of numeric volume, when you're basic tonnage over time, it's just looking at hard sets and effective sets and what that means. And it's kind of changing our vocabulary, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And in fact, I think that was something that was in, I want to say it was the July issue of Mass, where Eric talked about, relative intensity. That can be weight on the bar, or it can be RPE, Mm-hmm. And when you're talking about doing Myo-reps, that's a pretty high RPE, and that's kind of a way of measuring relative intensity as well.
And how do you like to prescribe your Myo-reps for the people that you do to say those last 3 things? How do you write that in your sheet, or how do you explain it to your athletes on how you'd like them to perform it?
As far as when they get their hands dirty in the gym?
Yeah, on their sheet, when say they have say their curls, they're doing Myo-reps. What do you tell them to do when they get to curls? Gotcha.
Well, I kind of use technical terms, but then I also use layman terms. You know what I mean? Okay. So I said, okay, basically, here's what you're going to do. You're going to exhaust your biceps on a curl by doing 15 or 20 repetitions. And then I want you to rest for about 3 or 4 breaths, and then do it again.
Exhaust it again.
Now, exactly. Yeah. And so then the technical term I'll say is that exhaustion set that you first start, that's what we call our activation set. Okay. And then every one after that is basically your cluster sets, your Myo-reps, what have you. Now, the way that I kind of usually have them record that, or the way that I tell them to do that on the sheet, is they'll usually put rep target 15, 4, 20, and then I'll put in parentheses 4, cluster sets 4, cluster sets 5, what have you. So
4 or 5 extra sets, and they just go till they can't go. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. I'll usually cap it. Most folks don't want to do more than 4. And then the crazy folks will want to do 5. Mm-hmm. And, if I do that, I'll kind of do it sparingly, Now, as far as programming it goes, keep in mind, I'm still in my infancy with this. I've only been using it now for probably a couple of months. Mm-hmm. But, Berto, you can correct me on this if it's probably not a good idea, but I'm doing it a lot with parts that I feel like need to be brought up. Okay. And so, the board short physique athlete that's doing, the model look, and the physique look, it's all about deltoids. It seems like the guy with the biggest caps up there, that's got the biggest V taper, is the guy that's going to, do well. And so many times, mean, even me, myself, my delts are lacking, you know. My delts look like they're lacking until I'm about 6%, you know. And so I'm prescribing a lot of Myo-reps on delt work, you know, and sometimes it's hard not to cheat on free weight movements. So I'll let them sometimes use either like a machine where they can't cheat. They got to sit down on their butt and they got to put their elbows underneath that pad, you know. But yeah, that's kind of how I've been prescribing it, is on those, especially those off-season athletes where it's like, okay, we got to bring up X, Y, and Z. And even my back is always lacking. I've got this wide waist. I need wider lats if I'm ever going to get on the stage again. So I pick safe movements to do Myo-reps for back work, like seal rows. Seal rows, I feel like, are a very, very safe movement. And I'll exhaust my lats on that activation set, and I'll do 4 cluster sets.
Yeah. No, and they're safe and like hard to cheat movements, like you said.
Exactly.
That's like a seated row would be like a hinge movement at the end of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And how many of those repetitions in the end are just garbage volume, you know?
Well, and then too, like if you're hammering someone's lats, you know, because we're trying to bring it up because physique in the next year or two, I think the wear and tear of if you did 4 sets of 15 to 20 versus an activation and 3 back offs would be, hopefully, I think, saving the joints a little bit too. Probably cutting it in half at least. Yeah.
I didn't even think about that, but that is a good point.
Okay. Berto, how about you? Let's add on to that.
No, what Brad said, I think it's good for especially small muscle groups that you might have an issue connecting with, because it's going to hurt for like 2-3 minutes straight, or you're going to be aware of your side delts or your rear delts. So it can help an athlete connect with that. I guess just the hard part is when you're going from straight sets to that, it's hard to quantify, and that's why you have to stick to something conservative, see what that does, and then progress from there.
Like y'all don't do, like you wouldn't just do this on a random day or like alternate it with regular stuff. Like you need to use the same weight, the same movement, same part of workout, and see how that goes, and then you can compare it with itself, is what you're saying.
Yeah. It's the same thing with kind of like rep ranges that are, you know, like very contrasting. It's like how we serve those up might be, they're you know, they can both be hard sets, but how what we learned over the long term, how we dose them might be different just because they are contrasting. But with the Myo-reps, it's great for muscles you want to connect with, and maybe movements that you don't have a whole lot of fun with. Like I don't like doing lateral delts of late, so it's like, hey, you know, it's going to be 3 minutes of this, and then I can, you know, go finish off with my triceps, which I love doing. So things like that, and then obviously like. That's where it really helps me, because I need a lot of volume, but my joints can't handle a lot of volume, but my muscles can. So that's an issue. I'm going to butcher this too, but I remember in that conversation with Eric, he was like, it's a good, I'm going to ruin it and someone's going to get mad at me, but it was something about how that type of technique would be good for someone who, like y'all said, the number of reps are what irritates a specific, like say elbow tendonitis, and you do this with curls to limit the number of reps. But it's not load, but it's volume. Whereas BFR is probably a good option if it's the load. Right, because you can get the pump with less weight being used. So it's like the type of, or what aggravates an injury might constitute whether BFR would be a better fit for your specific joint versus the Myo-reps. Man. Yeah, and I mean, just doing lateral raises like that, it's freed up my shoulders to where like my dumbbell pressing is like way better than it was at any point last off season, like by far. What spurred your brain to start bringing that into your practice, Brett? Time. Okay. I guess one of the reasons that I switched gym was because like I was just making too many friends at my hardcore gym. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go to this gym where I really don't know anyone, and I'm gonna be able to get my work done in an hour. And you know, it's like, hey, my big movements would take me like 20-30 minutes, and then I could get the rest of it in 30. To me, it was that was it.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm broken. So, and then that worked out. I'm like, hey, all of a sudden I'm feeling really good. Holy crap. The number of like, I guess, carries per game that I'm getting, the total reps that I'm doing has decreased significantly. So,
As a
and
football
I felt
reference,
that
I got it.
I know.
I got it.
I need to go back and explain that.
I understood
Yeah.
it. And by football, we mean American football. I got it.
Yes. Yeah. The only football. Right, Brad? You can't say that. You
Don't
cannot. That
say
was
that. The
Brad.
rest of the
People on
world's going to be
on the
mad.
podcast that we're done.
Sorry. I apologize.
No, I love soccer. I love soccer. What people don't get about soccer/football is that it's kind of like the video game The Golden Gun, where like you remember like 007, where like it was you had this one gun where if you found like it was a multi-shooter, you could play with your friends. With this gun, you won one shot. That was all it took, right? So imagine like the lifeline, like all the pride and joy of your country, especially come World Cup time. Like it can be done with one goal. Like when they are that close to your net, like you are like, this could be it. So how exciting is that? That's if you look at it from that perspective, like, hey, imagine that your life was on the line. Like that's your team and that's not your team. You would appreciate soccer totally more than I think the average American does who watches NBA basketball, where scores are like way over 100 sometimes.
Okay. I feel what you're saying. It's a low scoring sport in general.
It's
usually.
So okay. Whole inflation thing, yeah.
All right. Brad, do you have anything nice to say about soccer? Just to pull us out of a hole.
They have jacked legs.
They do have great legs. They have way better cardio than all of us.
Yeah, they have gargantuan legs. And I will say the 2 soccer matches that I think I have watched in my lifetime both came down to overtime rules, where they get like 5 shots. And I think one of them was actually, wasn't it in the 90s when the girls came down to overtime? And it was like decided in a millisecond. It was like goal.
Is that when the girl took her
miss.
shirt off and it was like a big old deal?
Yeah. And she got the goal after the other team missed in overtime, and it was like, yeah, it was decided in a second.
Yeah. And then everyone got all mad that she took her shirt off. Like literally half the sports are like half naked, and they got mad because a soccer player took her jersey off with a sports bra on. Yeah. Anyways.
A lot of times have changed, yeah.
Okay. I used to work with a soccer team. You knew that, right? I did my internship with the Houston Dynamo, the MLS team.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I played soccer once to get access to the weight room.
All right. See? Lots of benefits in that sport. All right, I think we did a good job with that.
Oh my gosh.
Pissing off everyone who's not American. Okay.
I was okay at it. I was good.
You're Mexican. You're supposed to...
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
I know how it goes. You drink beer at the sidelines, but I obviously didn't do that in high school. But
yeah. Okay, let's finish with your powerlifting coaching practices, some things that you're that have been super useful for you guys as of late, things you've liked doing.
I do like my strength athletes is off-season athletes that have no idea what their 1 rep maxes are, their 3 rep maxes. They want to be power lifters, but they don't feel like anything that they don't feel like they should be doing anything less than 5 reps. So it's kind of like once I get the hold of them, I get to figure all that stuff out. Once we kind of get their technique down, make sure that they're all, sound on that. They can actually do grinders, since that is a skill. I'll be like, okay, wow, now we can actually do some percentage-based programming.
Okay.
Because we're not just taking a guess, you know what I mean? And then when we do start prepping them for the platform, things are a little bit more, there's a less murky, you can kind of see things a little bit clearer.
So you're talking globs of clay in the powerlifting that you haven't really quite had before. That's exciting for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. Or even folks that it's like they know their 1 rep max, but they did it in like the most terrible way. They just kept going up in 5-pound increments until they got pinned.
Yeah.
So I get to mold them a little bit better.
Yeah. Is that common that when you get someone who says, I want to start powerlifting, that like, what do they do in the gym before they come to you? Are they just like, hey, I really like squat, bench, and deadlift. I'd like to start actually doing this intelligently now.
Yeah.
Oh,
Usually they're kind of doing somewhat bodybuilding work. The lowest they get is like 5 or 6 repetitions. And even then, their 5 or 6 repetitions, it's like they failed on their last set. So that's hardly a good indication of a 5 rep max.
yeah.
Uh, so yeah, that's kind of fun to take those folks and turn them into actual, power lifters,
Do you,
and give them a taste of that.
yeah, do you keep your powerlifting competitors, are they on the biweekly coaching protocol year round, or do you like to bring them on to weekly as they're leading up to their meet, Brad?
Yeah, definitely weekly as they're leading up.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, unless it's their first competition and we really don't have any, just like our only goal is to get there and go 9 for 9,
Yeah.
And we don't really care about setting PRs or making weight or, we have to meticulously taper. But yeah, if they're getting to that point to where it's like they've done their first competition, now they actually want to maybe compete a little bit and look at folks in their weight class, or maybe they want to look at themselves and they actually want to get true PRs. Almost have to get them to check in weekly at some point. So you got to convert them over from bi-weekly to weekly.
Yeah. Cool. Brad, Bert, what's your favorite thing right now with your power lifters?
There's more athletes now that are, I guess, it used to be powerlifters came from a bodybuilding background.
For us?
And it used to be that way where it's like, oh, I wanted to just look right. And now, I mean, you could be powerlifting because that's the first thing you saw and you went towards that. So sometimes a lot of the habits that come with someone who's a former like physique athlete or was interested in body recomp at first, they're not there. So sometimes when you teach a powerlifter, it's like, hey, you know what? It matters if like you eat protein. It matters if you sleep. It matters if like you hermit sometimes and you don't go like out every single weekend with your friends and get plastered. Like this adds up. That's I think that's been huge for a lot of these athletes who, again, they found weights because of powerlifting, not because they wanted to change the way they look. So like teaching them those things, I think has been it's been really effective. And almost like within a month, they're like, wow, I recover so much better.
Yeah.
Especially as they get to those segments close to meet before you pull out the volume where everyone's just crying about how messed up they are. Like that tends to be not as bad. So that's one. I had another one for powerlifters.
While you think about it, can you talk to us about you doing nutrition for powerlifters as of late? Right? Like you have a few athletes that have lifting coaches, but then see you for their nutrition, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of them are my friend Joey's athletes. Like
Joey Flex
he was like
666.
straight up said to me, yeah, straight up. He'll be like, he's like, this kid's an issue. Like, please fix this. And yeah, we'll fix it because often that is, it's like the outside the gym stuff that's kind of holding them back a little bit.
Yeah. And not for like lack of effort. They just, like you said, it, like with a strict strength athlete, probably could make it pretty far without worrying about that stuff.
Yeah. Because other sports there's a technique component to powerlifting, but there's also this like an important part of it is like your tissue has to adapt to that too.
Yeah.
With like other sports, if you have a knack for it, if you're good at studying what's going on during like your practice, like you can kind of make up for eating habits, not getting wonderful sleep. If you have physical wit, I guess there's not a whole lot of physical wit in powerlifting. It's like these same things over and over, and often what's limiting us is it's recovery. So it's been very useful to a lot of lifters, and almost like within a month they're like, wow, it's made a huge difference in how I'd recover.
Okay. What about programming specifically? Brad, you got anything there?
For powerlifters?
Yeah, anything like how you program powerlifters now versus a year or two ago? Is there anything that's really changed for you or that you've been using lately?
You know, I'm now starting to remember that what did you call it, Berto? The feeder workout.
Yeah.
That's that bridge in between. I'm incorporating that more and more and more. Even in my more seasoned lifters, you know what I mean? Just give them that day to where it's like, okay, it's heavy, you know, it's 85% of 1 RM, but I want you doing like 3 doubles with it, you know, so that last one is still an RPE like 7, you know. I've been incorporating that more and more and more with my power lifters. And it's kind of hard to get the converted bodybuilders that are going into powerlifting, you know, or the converted, you know, physique athletes that are going into bodybuilding. Because so often bodybuilders are just like, go hard, go hard, go hard, you know, get the pump, lots of reps, lots of reps, you know. And it's hard to get them to buy in to leave a lot in the tank. But I think once they kind of see the benefit of running 3-4 weeks of having a you know, an actual skill day there, even in someone that's very, very skilled, those other 2 seem to be a bit more productive. You know what I mean? The strength workouts, they actually feel a little bit stronger, and even the hypertrophy workouts, you know, it's hard to feel the strength of a hypertrophy workout, but they just feel like they can handle that volume better.
Okay. What about you, Bert? You said you had one thing. Do you remember it yet?
Yeah. The usage of be seen in a bunch of ways, but PAP, you know, like hitting a heavy single before you do your working weight to kind of decide how strong we are on that day.
What did you call it?
How physically ready we are.
Tester set.
Yeah, tester set. PAP, post activation potentiation, and it was actually on it was on Mass recently. But I remember just a long time ago, like when I first started lifting, I would use it when I was having kind of a day, and I'm like, man, this like 3x10 I don't want to do. So I'd hit a single, and then at least the first 5 in all my sets felt like okay. And now there's actual evidence that, yeah, it does work that way. But for powerlifters, I think anyone who's kind of caught up with the way they're training powerlifters now, especially raw lifters, it's pretty common because it kind of lets you see where they are, like fatigue-wise. Like if you just kind of put all their singles at RPE, say 7 or 8, like over the course of a training block, like you can kind of see how it's, you know, what it's doing over time and how quickly it picks up after you maybe drop the volume some, and how much, you know, how long can you push this person before, you know, they start to backtrack to the point where you're really seeing it in their performances. Yeah. So for powerlifters, it works really well because one, you can kind of see how they float when it comes to recovery, and then you can create training blocks based around what you kind of have historically seen with that. And then also it helps them with meet day management, because if they know what an opener should kind of feel like in terms of like the RPE scale, like an opener should kind of be like an 8-ish, we'll say, right? Like you kind of know that, okay, this was my opener, it didn't feel like that, we have to go to plan B. And, you know, they understand that, and they take it less personal, and they make better decisions come meet day. So, it helps you in developing cycles. It helps you in, like, especially newer lifters, in kind of deciding how to approach the specific meet. And with bodybuilders, I feel that it helps much in the way that it helped me early on, in that, you know, you have, you know, 4 sets of higher rep bench, 8 to 12. Sometimes just hitting that relaxed single, you don't get hyped up, it's just chill, relaxed single. You're going to have a better idea. If you are using something that's auto-regulated, it's going to help you, you know, pick the load for the day. But also it can, if you're having a rough day, sometimes like that can be the difference maker, where you're like, oh, now my volume work is easier. So that's probably been something on the training front, is just the usage of heavy singles.
Yeah.
And if you can hit good heavy singles consistently, your technique's going to be on point, and that's never a bad thing for your big compounds.
Yeah, or like the confidence of knowing you can do it whenever. Yeah, we do that a lot with my Olympic lifting programming. Like hit a heavy single, and then you have this amount of volume at 87% of that, or whatever. Yeah. Cool. I think we did it. Anything else in your day-to-day coaching that you're like wanting to share? Maybe conversations you're having with your athletes lately. No?
Right.
Anybody have anything about that?
Um,
Ways that you're phrasing shit different, maybe?
yeah, I'm doing a lot of layman's type stuff, like I was talking about with the Myo-reps.
Are you calling us dumb? Just kidding.
Just to kind of, because sometimes it gets intimidating. They're like, activation set, what do you mean by that? Bridge workout, what do you mean by that? So
So
I guess
your coaching videos, you're doing a lot more explaining versus okay.
Yeah. There was something else I was going to share, and like you, Andrea, it escaped me.
Okay.
We've all had that once.
I know.
We've
Fill
all
him
had
in.
that.
Bert, what do you got? Something else while he thinks.
With my Skypes especially, I try to have a whole lot more fun with them, because I can look at them as like I'm going to be on for the next hour, or I'm just going to have a good time with this person. And I think for me personally, and I think it ends up being better for them when
like just chit-chatting with your homies.
That's just especially if I've had Skypes with them before. It's like, let's just, oh shoot, that's right, we got to get to work. Like it's made it a whole lot more fun.
Oh, my Skypes are always way too long because I'd be like, so how's your wife? How's your cat? How was your trip?
It's kind of like when we do these podcasts. It's like maybe we should start doing the podcasts. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been doing that a lot more intentionally.
Yeah. Brad, do you remember?
So yes, and you guys can correct me if you're wrong, because this is something that I just recently started doing.
Okay.
But I've been telling people that it's okay to train when they know that their performance is not going to be necessarily good, right? I mean, in our bodybuilders, let's face it, most of the training is not fantastic, right? They're dieting, they're low on energy, and so therefore their performance is we just have to live with it. It's not going to be very good. Well, my off-season athletes, they kind of procrastinate a little bit. And they're like, I know that my performance is not going to be very good today, so I'm not going to train. I'm going to put it off another day. And it's funny because I had 2 of these conversations today, because I don't know about you guys, but a cluster of my athletes are sick. They got the flu, or they got the cold, or something like that. And so 3 times today, I've had the same conversation. I've explained to them that, you know what, poor performance is simply related to your fatigue levels. So just because you're not performing very good does not mean that it's not a very productive workout, right? Because performance is basically your potential strength, your fitness minus fatigue. And on that given day, yeah, volume might be down, performance might be down, but that's okay. For those conditions on that day with your fatigue that high, you probably were just as productive in that session as a day when your fatigue levels were lower and you actually did get more volume and you actually did perform real good. So that's one thing that I've just done here recently, like probably just within the last 6 months. And especially with my off-season athletes that are fed, they're most of the time feeling good. I'll say, look, you know what, unless you are really, really bad, you're throwing up, you're on death's door, or you just feel like you're so contagious that you're going to give everybody in the gym your junk. It's okay to have training days where your performance is not great. It doesn't mean it was not very productive. It was just your fatigue levels were higher than usual, and that particular session is probably going to be just as productive as any of your good sessions. And obviously, we don't want it to happen all the time. But how often are you sick? If you're sick and you're past the bad part, you can probably go in and train and have the peace of mind to know that, it's not a great day, but it was still a productive day.
Yeah. Well, and like y'all have said, the off season, it's a lot of habit building, right? And if you're in the habit of only going to the gym when you feel 100% amazing, if you ever want to compete in anything, that's going to be a problem, right? Because there's going to be days in prep. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of days in prep. Yeah, I could see it both ways. Because I think 3D has spent a lot of time and is maybe sometimes seen as the poster child of like, hey, things don't have to be rigid. And like, that's totally true. And we say that a lot, but I think that's a good point, Brad, that at the same time, it doesn't mean we're pussies. It doesn't mean you don't get shit done when you need to get shit done. And that's, I guess that could be a confusing message, right? If you really had to work hard to teach yourself, like, okay, it doesn't have to be rigid all the time. But I think that's a good sense of balance that you're implementing there, Brad, is like, not every day is going to be the best day. And like you said, with productivity, it's like on your best day, so you have 100% of your stores and you're working at 90%. Well, if you're only at 80%, you could still work to 70. And I get what you're saying, like in terms of fitness and fatigue. It's what you have that day. Word. Thanks for sharing that, Brad.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Before we go, Berto, what's your soccer team?
My soccer team?
Yeah, you still got to bring up for the people you offended earlier.
Oh, well, here we go. Look at that. Hey.
What's this?
It's the Real Madrid. The Real. We only mess with the Real. All right?
Real Madrid.
Keep it real.
Okay.
No, I did play soccer, but then I ended up doing badminton and other sports just to
What?
get, you know how it is. Like,
Badminton?
Yeah, my school wouldn't let you, like, play with the weight room unless you play the sport. So this one year, like, my girlfriend at the time, she's like, you can't play varsity soccer. And I'm like, BS, I'll go play varsity soccer. So I did until I started to miss too many practices. And then I just got a gym membership. But yeah, all for the sake of the weight room.
All for the gains.
Thanks,
okay.
You literally are starting to sound like Mark Wahlberg's character in the movie The Other Guys. Well, yeah, I learned how to play the harp. I learned how to play the harp so I could make fun of all the harp players over there.
Every sport, if you're kind of lacking in skill, one thing that it's like the hustle, it helps immensely. Like if you can make up for a lack of knowing what to do sometimes by just working really hard. Like we see it with bodybuilding all the time. It's like sometimes it's like doing a bunch of things wrong, but you work really hard, and they tend to do pretty well.
It's true. We'll leave it with that. A lesson on hard work. Thanks, Bert. Thanks so much for listening, guys. 3DMJ prides itself on keeping this show, our blog, and our YouTube channel as free and relevant sources of information for our community week after week. We also release additional free video courses as often as possible at 3dmjvault.com. If you'd like to help support our mission and our work, please consider becoming a monthly patron of our endeavors. Go to patreon.com/team3dmj and donate as little as $1 per month to our cause of helping educate and grow the drug-free bodybuilding and powerlifting communities worldwide. You can definitely choose to donate more, and if you do so, we'll send you discount codes for future use on any of our paid products. But any little bit helps, and we appreciate your monthly support in any amount that you see fit. So again, you can start assisting the team at patreon.com/team3dmj. That's patreon.com/team3dmj. Thanks for sticking around, and we'll see you in the next show.